Hello and welcome to the Truthful Misconceptions podcast. Today we're going to talk about Israel and some of the history that has brought us to where we are today. There is so much information and passion from both sides of the argument. Hopefully after this we can have a productive but civilized conversation. We did some research and found so much information that there is no way to cover everything. So we decided to talk about a few things that stood out. During World War II, the phrase "the genocide in Europe should happen in the Middle East" was used in the 1930s and 40s by the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husani. He aligned himself with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. With the Holocaust already underway, he met with Hitler in 1941 and sought an axis of support to block Jewish refugees escaping genocide in Europe from reaching Palestine. His radio broadcasts and political communications promoted anti-Semitic rhetoric. This was reported to have started a movement that created the PLO, Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, and other anti-Semitic groups. Then there is the phrase "from the river to the sea." In the late Ottoman and British Mandate period of the late 19th and early 20th century, the land between the Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea was often referred to as Palestine. Different nationalist groups, Zionists, Arab Palestinians, and regional Arab movements each envisioned a political entity over the same geographic location. At this time, the river to the sea was not a political slogan, but an idea of sovereignty over the full territory was central to all sides. It was on or around 1948, early Israeli statehood, that the phrase began to take on different meanings. Zionist factions promoted a vision of a Jewish state in all the land between the river and the sea. The phrase itself was not common, but was referred to in maps and songs. In the mid-20th century, the Palestinian nationalist and revolutionary movements used to say, "The river to the sea, Palestine will be free," especially the PLO and Hamas as well in the 1980s. For some Palestinian activists, the phrase meant a call to freedom and self-determination, while others the end of Israeli occupation. But for others like Hamas, it historically implied the elimination of the state of Israel and replacement with an Islamic Palestinian state. This is the roots of the argument of that phrase that still goes on today. For more about Israel, joining us is Craig Brandt, state senator from New Mexico and founder of the Friends of Israel Project. Thank you for giving us some of your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
So there's a lot of misinformation about Israel, and I did a little bit of research, and it's unbelievable how much is out there. So, in your opinion, what is the biggest misconception that people have about Israel?
Well, I think that, just one of the things, and this is one of the reasons that I started the Friends of Israel project, is to really help people realize that, that the Jews are not to blame for everything. We've given Jewish people a whole lot of power if we think 16 million people control everyone else in the world. This is a huge thing that's being, talked about in the US. You have a whole group of people that are, oh, well, America first means that we can't have anything to do with anyone outside of America. That's a huge mistake, first of all. And I think that's one of the things we really need to, discuss, is how this America first agenda has become, with some people, America only. And that's just totally wrong. It's never been, in my opinion, President Trump's position to say that America should stand on its own and not have anything to do with the rest of the world. In fact, one of the things he ran on was he was going to stop all the wars, and he's pretty much stopped all of them except the Ukraine and Russia. So I think it's important that we understand that first of all, Israel is literally the best ally the United States has now or has ever had. Now,
Why?
what do I mean by that?
Right. Why?
Yeah. Why? Well, for a couple of reasons. For one, Israel's entire economy is built on technological advances. So they start more than 50% of all technology advances are started in Israel. And then once they get it to a certain size, they will sell it to a larger company or bring in a partner company like Google or, uh, you know, Intel is one of the companies they brought in on the Mobileye project. And Mobileye project is literally the platform that's being used for your AI driving, vehicles that can drive themselves, which personally I think is a phenomenal idea. And would love to have a vehicle that drives itself because I like to travel by car, but I don't like driving the car. But the first place Israel always looks to on any new technology is they always offer it to the U.S. first, or a U.S. company first. The other thing is that all of our most of our combat experience. Now we've had some for the last 20 years, but mostly now our military's out of any conflicts, which is great. Glad they are. But where do you test new equipment if you don't have any conflicts going on? You get real world experience with your equipment by having it tested in Israel by the Israeli military, by the IDF. And they do a lot of the testing for us as we develop new technology. And a lot of our military technologies actually developed together. So most of the interior design of an F-16 cockpit was actually designed by Israel. And most people don't have a clue but that was a joint project with Israel. The Iron Dome was a joint project between Israel and the United States. In fact, most of the Iron Dome's rockets are made in Arkansas, and then they're sent over to Israel. And that's where Trump's looking at how do we do something similar to that here. The latest thing that Israel's developed when it comes to their protection is called the Iron Beam. And this thing's amazing. Instead of shooting a rocket, it actually uses lasers to shoot down anything. It can shoot down the drones. It can shoot down missiles. It can shoot down anything that's trying to be launched into Israeli airspace. It can shoot down. Now, the big reason this is such a huge advance is it costs $50,000 for each missile to knock down another missile. It only cost
Wow.
about $2 to fire the beam. Pretty
Amazing.
significant savings. Now think about, you look at Israel. Israel's about the size of New Jersey. So you got this little tiny country, and we've got the United States, who Trump is now wanting to do something like this. It's going to be a whole lot less expensive to cover and defend our airspace in the United States with the Iron Beam than it is with the Iron Dome. And in fact, I don't think it'd even be possible with such a large country as we are to protect it with the Iron Dome. But I think we can do it with the Iron Beam. And so it's those types of technologies that make Israel the the greatest ally we can have. We train with the IDF. We send our special forces over to train with the IDF. Our CIA trains with Mossad. We do so much together. And in fact, if Israel wasn't there, we would have to have a presence there all the time. And it would cost us billions of dollars a year. Yeah. So, one of the other technologies that Israel has been forced to create, and they have been a leader in desalinization. If you're not familiar, salt water's saline water, and they have to take the salt out of it. Israel has a ton of salt water. What they don't have much of is fresh water, and so they started from the very beginning in 1948, studying and figuring out how to remove the salt from water and make it fresh water, so that they can grow. And at this point, they used to have to import water, but now they're actually exporting water. So they've done such a great job with this that they actually are doing two things with what they call excess water, which is kind of amazing. They're in a desert and calling it excess water, but they export some of that water to Jordan because Jordan doesn't have a lot of fresh water. And they are using part of it to refill the Sea of Galilee because they've kind of like lots of other places in the world have gone through a pretty recent drought, and the Sea of Galilee was emptying. And so they've been using their excess water to refill it, and to try to keep everything full. They also grow numerous crops. You would never think that this area of the desert, which literally is just desert, could grow the food that they grow, but they have done some amazing technological advances in being able to turn desert into an oasis. They grow grapes, have vineyards, they have pretty much grow probably about 80% of their food is grown in Israel, which is pretty amazing for a country that didn't have any water, but now they've been able to take that. What they do mostly now, though, is they will build a desalination plant and build the resource for the energy, because it takes actually quite a bit of energy to take out salt from water. And so they will build a power plant next to it, and they're looking at using the small nuclear reactors. Well, up until now, they've pretty much used natural gas because they found a huge deposit of natural gas, which is also helping with their security, as well as helping Europe not have to depend on Russia for their gas supplies. So Israel's just really far advanced. In fact, here in New Mexico, we're very similar to Israel in the fact that we're all desert, and so I've been working with the company in Israel that does all their desalination. Their name is, well, they go by the acronym IDE. I've been working with them, connecting them with our state, with our water engineer to look at doing some desalination projects here in New Mexico, because we're out of fresh water as far as new water, but we have a lot of aquifers that are brackish aquifers. They have a lot of minerals in them and a lot of salt in them. Not nearly as much as the ocean, but so we're looking at doing a joint project with them on being able to fix the water problems here in New Mexico, which is
Wow.
really one of the things that's kept New Mexico from growing is our lack of drinkable water.
In the research that I've done, I was under the impression that most of Israel was a desert. But in doing a little research, you can actually go swimming in a river and go skiing in the same day. I didn't realize they had a mountainous region. And then in the north, I guess
Yeah,
there's a very flourishing farmlands, and that has to do with the water that you were talking about there.
they have some natural water from some of the rivers, but it's not nearly enough to farm and do everything else. So they've had to really create ingenious ways of creating water. In fact, one of the newer technologies they created is actually able to pull moisture out of the air and create water in the middle of nowhere. And they've actually been using that a lot in Asia and Africa. Israel has exported that to help those areas where people were dying because they didn't have enough water to live. They would bring in those water generators, and literally just from the air, the moisture in the air, they create drinkable water for people to be able to survive.
Is there anything that has you really concerned?
Well, I think that there's one thing, America, and this is, my background is that I was a pastor, I was in the military, and so those things I know a little bit about. But there's a really concerning trend going on, and it's really started in the quote unquote Christian church. This theology that's called replacement theology. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No.
So replacement theology teaches that Christianity replaced God's covenant with Abraham. And so the people of God are Christians, not Israel. This is a very concerning thing for me, being a pastor, but also it's really given some people, like Candace Owens, as an example, has really come out and said that Israel's not God's people anymore. God's not protecting them anymore. Problem is, there's nowhere in Scripture it says that. In fact, the opposite is found in Scripture. In Romans chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, it says, I ask then, has God rejected his own people, the nation of Israel? And then Paul goes on to say, of course not. He says, I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham and a member of the tribe of Judah. No, God has not rejected his own people, whom he chose from the very beginning. There's several places in the New Testament that say something very similar, that point out directly that God has not abandoned his covenant with the people of Israel. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's a justification for people to be is to to really push their anti-Semitism by saying, well, the church shouldn't support Israel because God's turned his back on Israel. Nothing could be further from the truth. God hasn't turned his back on people. So for those of you that believe in God, I know there may be people listen to this that don't, and that's okay. Your belief is between you and you know whatever you believe. But it's very concerning to me that there are groups within the Christian church. It's probably close to about 20% of the people that call themselves Christians who are falling for this false theology. And it's really led to a lot of the anti-Semitism that we're seeing in America today. Is this theology that's being pushed out there that Israel is no longer God's people. I think that's one of the biggest concerns that we see in America. We've seen it in the college campuses. We've seen it in these protests. Is the anti-Semitism in America and throughout the world has increased over 700% since October 7th of 2023. It's one of those things that again is one of the reasons that I've put together this Friends of Israel project organization, is really to combat against that and be able to share with people, this is what the truth is. This is what Israel has really done for the Middle East. They're really the only democracy in the Middle East is Israel, and they're the only stable country in the Middle East. Everywhere else has ups and downs and all over the place. And I mean, even Turkey, who used to be one of our greatest allies, we can no longer count on because the president of Turkey now is a fundamentalist. He's and has really gotten in bed with Russia. Well, as everyone knows, Russia is one of our biggest enemies. So how can you trust an ally who's allying themselves with your greatest enemy?
Do you want to touch on anything like that's going on in Dearborn? You know what freaked me out yesterday? I I was watching the videos of what's going on in Dearborn right now with the anti-protest and the protests. And just after I wrote this and started recording it, the term "the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" was on a banner walking down a street in Michigan, and kind of freaked me out that that's Hamas, the PLO, the Muslim Brotherhood.
Absolutely, it is.
It's in our country.
Yeah, I think the main thing, is what have we seen? And I think we can tie it into Israel really easily. If you go to Bad Hashem, which is the Holocaust Museum in Israel, you can see some really disturbing things. And when I saw it the first time, I was amazed at the how it coincides with what I see happening in America today in our colleges. Most of your anti-Semitism right before World War II, before Hitler came in, was being pushed by the universities in Germany and throughout Europe. It's exactly the same thing we're seeing right now. In fact, there was a game that was in 1933 that was being pushed, and it's a board game for families to play. That it's called Jews Out, and it's all about you know removing the Jewish people, getting rid of Jews. I mean, how sick is that? In 1933, they're playing family board games with their children that are basically pushing to exterminate the Jews. This is exactly what we're seeing happening in our own campuses, where what you have is a lot of foreign money that has come in. And if you trace that money back, a lot of it's coming through Qatar into our universities and other Muslim countries, as well as China. They're one of the other big ones, but they're not They're not necessarily anti-Semitic, but all these Muslim countries are, for the most part, and they've been funneling money through Qatar to our universities and pushing this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic position that Jews are the fault for everything, just like what Hitler was pushing. What most people don't realize, though, is that Hitler and the Muslim people in the Middle East were they were allies, they were partners. Muslim Brotherhood basically was partnered with Hitler to get rid of all the Jews. In fact, they were working with them to try to keep them from coming to the Israel, what we now know as Israel, which at the World War II time was actually controlled by Britain. From the river to the sea is basically is the area that God had promised to the Jewish people, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to their descendants, which their descendants are the people that we call Jewish people today. Um, the river to the sea didn't start as a bad thing, but it was taken over by the Palestinian group to mean we want to push the Jewish people from the river to the sea. In other words, we want to get rid of them. We want to exterminate them, is literally what that means. Now, most people that are saying that, most people that are doing a banner don't know that. But my guess is in Dearborn, Michigan, which has been pretty much taken over by the Muslim community, that they know exactly what they're saying.
Wow. It's hard to believe
It's
that
really a
that's
scary thing to think that a city in our country has been taken over by a radical group. And not all Muslims are radical, so don't take that wrong. But there is definitely a radicalized group within Islam who have taken over control of Dearborn, Michigan. And in fact, they're wanting to institute Sharia law. And let's just be really clear, Sharia law and our Constitution are incompatible. The
right.
Sharia law forces women to wear these uh,
Burqa.
burqas. Yeah. And also, they can stone women who, you know, um, as they would say, defile themselves before marriage. None of those things are compatible with our Constitution at all. And there's a whole lot more to Sharia law than that. But basically, Sharia law puts the control over individuals in the hands of a religion and not freedom. So how is that compatible with a constitution that says, yeah, every man has a right to be free, that all men are created equal, and that the government shall not set a religion over the people? It just does not fit at all, and that's why you've seen Texas recently pass a law that Sharia law will not be instituted by any community in Texas. It's probably something we ought to do nationwide.
On a lighter note, you've been to Israel and traveled around the country, and some of the pictures that I've seen are absolutely amazing. Could you speak to any of that?
Yeah, I got to go to Israel last December. Way too short. In fact, I'm planning to go back in May of next year. But one of the places, my favorite place of the whole trip, was a community called Haifa. Haifa sits on the northern edge of Israel on the Mediterranean Sea. So they've got a beautiful port. It's just a gorgeous city. Sits on the hilltop is back there behind it. It's just one of those places. In fact, most of those pictures that I've got are from the top of that mountain, pointing down towards the sea. They've got the Baha'i Gardens there that are another religious group I never knew anything about. Um, but they actually none of them live there. They just have this garden they maintain, and then they have a once a year pilgrimage to Haifa. So really interesting, but it's just an absolutely gorgeous place. I'm actually working there to have the city I live in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, adopt Haifa is a sister city, because it also has an Intel research facility there. And Rio Rancho has the only Intel plant in New Mexico is right here in Rio Rancho. And so we've kind of connected with them. They do cruises out of there. They haven't been able to do any cruises for a couple of years now since October 7th, but hopefully their cruise industry will get started again. It's just a beautiful community, but there's some really gorgeous places there. We talked a little bit about, and I think both of us before I went had the same thought that, oh, it's nothing but desert. I thought it just kind of looked like Albuquerque, New Mexico, everywhere without the mountains, but it's just some really neat places. There's another picture right along the Mediterranean in Tel Aviv. Now, Tel Aviv is the largest city, but it's not the capital. Jerusalem's the capital. But Tel Aviv sits right on the Mediterranean Sea. It's kind of the younger, hipper city, if that makes sense. It's where all the younger people like to live. There's a lot of night activities. It's probably like the New York of Israel, although there's more people in New York than there are in the entire country of Israel. So the population is only 9.5 million people in Israel. There are such gorgeous places, and of course, if you're a believer, then there's obviously the places that where Jesus walked that you can go, and that's one of the things we'll be doing when they're in May. I'm taking a group that will be going, and we're going to do the Holy Tour. Plus, we're going to spend a few extra days meeting with some government officials while I'm there to work on some of the projects I have going with Israel.
Well, sir, I want to thank you for your time you spent here. Is there a is there a way people can get involved in your project?
I think the easiest way is to go to our website at friendsofisraelproject.org. We have a lot of good information on there. It tells you a lot about us. Tells you why I started this project, why I got involved, but also tells you several things we do. The information about our trip to Israel next year is there. We do have a cutoff on that of 20 people. So if you're interested, let me know right away so I can try to save you a spot. But you can go there, get involved. There's a lot of things that we could use volunteers for as far as doing some writing. So if you're really good at writing, we want to keep up a current blog. We're also going to be connecting with a lot of other groups, that we've vetted. We know that they're going to give you good information because nowadays, a lot of times you're just not getting good information out of Israel. And so we vetted several groups that will be sharing their information and their links on our website so you can, connect in and kind of find out what's going on the ground in Israel.
Well, again, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.